On the edge of a storm, a man who's forgotten how to live opens his door to a child's plea and to a mercy that will change the course of his lonely world. The wind that night carried no mercy. It came down from the north with the sound of something lost, a hollow roar through pine and distance, cold enough to make the stars blink. Inside his cabin, Hollis Miller sat before the fire. The flames threw long shadows across the walls, painting the shape of a man who'd been too long alone. He was 36, but time had carved him deeper than his years. 7 winters widowed, 7 seasons of talking only to the wood he split and the fire he fed. The chair across from him sat empty, always had. The bed behind him, too. The crackle of burning logs had become his companion's voice. The sigh of wind against the shutters, his answer. Folks in town called him Giant Miller, strong as an ox, quiet as the hills. The kind of man who could lift a wagon wheel with one hand and still speak like thunder, trying not to wake the earth. He came to town only when the pantry cried hunger, never for whiskey, never for company. The world had taken enough from him. He'd decided not to ask it for more. That night, the storm was easing, but the air was heavy. Snow pressed against the window panes, muting every sound but the heartbeat of the fire. Hollis rose to toss another log into the hearth when he heard it. 3 knocks. In sharp interastia. Trembling. Human. He froze, the log in his hand halfway to the flames. No one came to his door after dark. Not in winter, not in this country. He waited. The wind brushed once against the eaves, then silence again. Then a second knock. Softer but urgent, like the last breath of something trying not to fade. He set the log down. The floor groaned under his boots as he stepped to the door. The latch lifted slow, his breath clouding in the air. When he opened it, the cold rushed in, and with it, a sight that broke his stillness clean in two. A little girl stood there, no more than 7, hair tangled and wet with snow, cheeks raw, lips trembling. Her dress was torn at the hem, her boots so worn the snow had found her toes. She looked up at him, this mountain of a man filling the doorway, and didn't flinch. "Please, sir," she whispered, voice small but steady. "They beaten my mama. She can't get up." The words struck him like a ghost's whisper. He hadn't heard such desperation in years. She didn't cry. She'd run past the point of tears. She only waited, the kind of still waiting that belongs to those who've seen too much, too young. "Who's your mama?" Hollis asked, his voice a low rumble that seemed to rise from the ground itself. "Mary Ellen," she said. "Mary Ellen Carter. They left her by Miller's Creek. Please, sir, help her." That name hit him like a bell. Mary Ellen Carter. He knew it. He'd seen her in town, quiet woman, soft-spoken, with a bruised grace that made decent men look away and cowards look satisfied. Her husband, Elias Carter, was the latter, thick-necked, mean-spirited, the kind who measured his worth in fear. Hollis had seen him raise a hand to her once outside the mercantile. He'd turned away. The West had its code. A man's home wasn't yours to mend, even when it was broken. But hearing her name now, from the lips of a child, changed everything. He knelt slowly, his sighs filling the doorway like a wall against the cold. "What's your name, little one?" "Laura May," she whispered. Her lip trembled, but she held his gaze. There was dirt on her cheeks, bruises on her wrist, and a kind of courage in her eyes that no child should need. "Get inside," Hollis said gently. She hesitated, small and shaking, until a gust of wind nearly pushed her off her feet. Then she obeyed. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. The wool swallowed her whole. "Fire's there," he said. "Warm yourself." Then he turned back to the door, his hand already reaching for his coat and hat. "I'll bring her back," he murmured, to no one, and to everyone. It sounded like a vow. Then he stepped into the storm. As to connect him, Miller's Creek lay a mile north, through bare cottonwoods and grass turned to glass by frost. The moon rode high above the ridge, silvering the world in ghostlight. The snow bit at his face as he walked, each breath a sting of ice, each step a promise kept. He didn't need a lantern. He knew this land like the lines in his own palm. When he reached the shack by the creek, the sight stopped him. The door hung open, one hinge weeping rust. No smoke, no sound, only stillness. Inside, the smell of whiskey and neglect burned his nose. And there, in a corner on a pallet of rags, Mary Ellen Carter. Her face was half shadow, half ruin. Bruises bloomed dark under one eye, her lips split, her wrists scored with rope burns. But her eyes, they still held fire, dim but alive. "You shouldn't have come," she rasped. "They'll say things. They'll ruin you." Hollis knelt beside her, his voice low. "Let them talk." He slid his arms beneath her, gentle as he could manage, and lifted her like she weighed no more than a whisper. She gasped once, but didn't fight him. Her head fell against his chest. Her breath was shallow, but steady. As he carried her back through the snow, the wind began to quiet, as if even the storm itself understood it wasn't the loudest thing in the world tonight. In Statereg de Bismika-s, Laura May was waiting at the cabin door, eyes wide, hope lighting her face when she saw her mother. Hollis laid Mary Ellen on his bed, the only one he owned. "Let he take your bed," she whispered. "You can," he said, tucking the blanket around her. "And you will." He built the fire higher, until the whole room glowed warm and gold. Then he fetched water, tore clean cloth from one of his shirts, and began to clean her wounds. His touch was slow, awkward, careful. She winced, but didn't pull away. There was no shame between them, only exhaustion. Laura curled beside her mother, her small hand gripping her sleeve. The rhythm of their breathing filled the cabin, fragile, human, alive. Hollis sat back on his heels and looked at them. The woman he'd known only by rumor, and the child who'd braved a storm for love. Something shifted inside him, a soundless crack deep in the places a man keeps buried. Outside, the snow began again, soft, steady, erasing the world. He moved to the window. The moon hung low, cold as iron. Somewhere beyond the trees, Elias Carter was awake, drunk, angry, his shame twisting itself into blame. Hollis's hand curled into a fist against the frame. His jaw tightened. He'd made his choice the moment he carried her from that floor. Whatever storm came next, he'd meet it. Behind him, Mary Ellen's breathing deepened, sleep pulling her under. Laura whispered something in her dreams. The fire cracked, the warmth rising steady. Hollis stood watch, a man between mercy and danger, between silence and the first stirrings of something he didn't dare name. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was something even rarer. It's vost again.
I'll read when. And it hailed through the night.
Under the hush of falling snow, mercy turns to rumor. A woman learns to stand again. A child begins to laugh again. And a man made of silence faces the sharp edge of a town's judgment, all while something tender begins to stir. Bane woman to that decision, bullet tone. Morning came gray and slow, the kind of light that seeps, thin as forgiveness. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world quiet as prayer. Alice was already awake. He moved through the cabin like he'd done it 1,000 mornings before, stoking the fire, pouring water from the kettle, breathing warmth back into the room. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, 2 breaths broke the silence, one small, one weary. Mary Ellen stirred, her body aching in ways she didn't yet name. When her eyes opened, she blinked at the light, confused for half a moment. Then she saw her daughter, safe, sleeping, and her eyes found Hollis's broad back by the hearth. For the first time in a long while, fear didn't come first. "You ought to rest," Hollis said, voice low, rough from disuse. "Raise me delay." "Whoa, I've rested too long," she murmured. Her voice was hoarse, but her pride was intact. He turned, pouring cornmeal into a tin bowl, the smell of smoke and steam filling the air. "Then eat. You'll need your strength." She shook her head. "I can't take your food." You can," he said simply, setting the bowl in her hands. "And you will." The words carried no pity, only truth, the kind that leaves no room for shame. Mary Ellen's hands trembled as she ate, each bite a reminder she was still alive. Laura stirred beside her, blinking sleep from her eyes. When she saw her mother upright, a grin broke across her face like sunrise after storm. She climbed into her lap, wrapping her arms tight around her neck. Hollis looked away, though the corner of his mouth twitched, the smallest ghost of a smile. Outside, snow lay deep and undisturbed. Inside, something fragile had begun to take root. Not peace, not yet, but its quiet beginning. Pretty talking up the road, and for 2025 is a wanted bit to be. Is hey, like you more. Doesn't mean ors being ill hopus to seas, padding, or communiers. The days stretched long, measured not by clocks, but by chores and firelight. Mary Ellen healed in the slow, honest rhythm of winter. The bruises turned from purple to yellow to pale. The cuts faded, the trembling eased. Each morning, Hollis rose before dawn, splitting wood, hauling water, feeding the animals. When he returned, he cooked what little they had, and mended what needed mending. He wasn't a man of words, but his silence was never empty. It filled the cabin like steady breathing, calm, patient, certain. Mary Ellen came to depend on it. Some nights, when the wind howled through the eaves, she'd glance up from sewing and find him carving at the table, his hands large, deliberate, turning scraps of pine into small shapes. She never asked what they were for. Then, one evening, she found out. Laura was sitting by the hearth when Hollis placed something in her lap. A little horse, rough-carved but beautiful in its simplicity. "Row. For me," the girl gasped. Hollis nodded once, looking more at the fire than at her. Laura smiled, shy and proud, and ran her thumb along its wooden mane. Then she laughed. It was a sound the cabin hadn't known in a long time. It reached every dark corner and filled it with light. Mary Ellen turned away before the tears could show in Emery. Every time, as Ben. But peace has enemies, and none so patient as gossip. By week's end, Copper Bend was buzzing with talk. Mary Ellen Carter run off, the voices whispered. Took up with Giant Miller in his cabin by the creek. Men spat her husband's name with contempt. Women whispered hers with pious pity. At the Mercantile, Mrs. Prudence Calloway made sure the story had legs. A woman's virtues like glass, she said, arranging her bolts of fabric with righteous precision. Once cracked, it don't mend proper. The sheriff said little. Most men didn't. It was easier to look away than to correct a rumor. When Hollis rode into town for supplies, the talk stopped mid-breath. Boots stilled, eyes turned. He loaded his feed and flour in silence. The air itself seemed to tighten around him. At the hitching post, old Ben Harker, the blacksmith, leaned on his hammer and spat tobacco into the snow. "World's full of fools, Miller," he muttered, "but fools got tongues. You sure you want to carry this burden?" Hollis looked at him, slow and level. "Ain't a burden if it's right." Ben nodded once. "Then you best be ready for the weather that follows." Hollis climbed into his wagon without another word. As he turned toward home, the first snowflakes began to fall again. Small, defiant things that refused to heed the town's talk. User property or heart subscribe. Sunday came with clear skies and the bells echo across the plain. Mary Ellen hesitated when Hollis said they'd go to church. "They'll stare," she whispered. "Let 'em," he said simply. So she wrapped herself in her plainest shawl, hiding what bruises the cold hadn't yet erased, and climbed into the wagon beside him. Laura nestled between them, clutching her wooden horse. The church stood small against the winter hills, paint peeling, its steeple pointing heavenward like an old man's finger. Inside, the stove popped and hissed, failing to chase away the chill. When Hollis entered with the two Carters, every head turned. The whispers began, soft but sharp as needles. Today, Reverend Hodge stumbled over his sermon. He spoke of forgiveness and sin, his voice catching oddly when it brushed against the word mercy. Mary Ellen kept her gaze low. She didn't need to see the faces to feel the heat of judgment. When the final hymn faded, she rose to leave, only to find Mrs. Calloway blocking her path on the steps. "My dear," the woman said sweetly, "some of us think it might be better for you to stay with kin, for appearance's sake." Mary Ellen's lips parted, but no sound came. Then a shadow fell across both women. Hollis, he said nothing. He didn't have to. His silence was enough, a quiet that made even the self-righteous falter. Mrs. Calloway's smile wilted. "The Lord's mercy to you both," she murmured, retreating with her shawl fluttering like a flag of surrender. Mary Ellen's breath shook. "I've brought ruin on you," she whispered. Hollis looked at her, eyes like weathered oak. "Wasn't peace I was after," he said softly. "It's what I found." She met his gaze, and for the first time since her husband's hand had bruised her, she felt something close to dignity. "Do you?" And he listened up after Benny. The days shortened. The nights grew sharper, the stars burning hard against the cold. The cabin became its own small world, warm, alive, defying the frost. Mary Ellen mended Hollis's shirts. He chopped wood till his breath came in steam. Laura's laughter returned, bright and constant. And sometimes, in the quiet between chores, their eyes would meet a moment too long, too honest. A hand brushing past another's, a word left unspoken, because saying it might make it real. Hollis didn't trust the feeling. He only knew it had weight. For the first time in years, he feared losing something again. Seth, older spots can the vigilation. But beyond that warmth, trouble was stirring. In the saloon, Elias Carter's name was rising with the whiskey. He drank himself meaner each night, boasting to anyone who'd listen. "She's mine," he'd snarl. "He's hiding her, and I'll take back what's mine, or bury him for it." Men laughed nervously, nursing their cups, not eager to test Hollis Miller's size. But words travel faster than courage. By week's end, Mary Ellen heard them too, whispered to her at the mercantile by Mrs. Dyer, who meant no harm, but carried plenty. "He's gathering men, Mary," she said softly. "You'd best run while you can." Mary Ellen walked home pale as the snow, her pulse pounding. She found Hollis mending a fence near the corral. "He's coming," she said. "He won't stop till he does." Hollis straightened, the hammer still in his hand. Then let him come.
Her breath caught. They'll kill you.
He looked at her, calm, steady. Not before he learns what it means to fear. She wanted to protest, but something in his eyes silenced her. Not rage, not pride, just certainty. For the first time in her life, she saw what safety looked like, and it terrified her more than danger ever had. "He's yuagging. German warriors trennelist is in a vage." That night, Laura couldn't sleep. The wind clawed the roof like old ghosts. She crept from her pallet and went to Hollis, who sat by the fire, carving again. "You won't let him hurt Mama, will you?" she whispered. He lifted her into his lap, his hand engulfing her small shoulder. "Not while I draw breath," he said simply. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the slow, steady drum of his heart. It was the sound of a promise too big to break. She fell asleep there, safe for the first time she could remember. Mary Ellen watched from the bed, tears catching the firelight. She had prayed for angels once. She'd never thought they'd come with calloused hands and a silence that could stand against storms. Outside, the wind moaned through the pines. Inside, warmth held. And beneath it all, something wordless began to bloom. From the far edge of the plains rides vengeance, wrapped in snow. A man of fists and pride comes to claim what cruelty once owned. And a quiet giant must decide whether mercy can stand its ground, or must stack. By noon, the sky had turned the color of iron. Clouds rolled low and slow across the peaks, the air thick with that strange metallic scent that always came before a storm or before trouble. Hollis Miller felt it first in his bones. He worked the barn in silence, stacking feed, checking the stall doors twice. Each motion was steady, but his thoughts weren't. The world had gone too still, like it was holding its breath. When he stepped outside, flakes were already falling. Soft things, harmless looking. He knew better. Storms always start gentle. So do reckonings. Mary Ellen was inside folding linens, her movements quick but restless. Laura sat near the hearth, tracing the wooden horse with her small thumb. Hollis brushed snow from his shoulders and closed the door behind him. She turned. "Is it true?" He nodded once. "He's coming." Her hands tightened on the cloth. "Then we have to run." "No," he said. His voice didn't rise. It never had to. "Running don't change a man like him. It just gives him more road to follow." She sank onto the stool, pale in the firelight. "He won't stop, Hollis. You don't know him." "Oh, his kind." He checked the rifle, loaded it, set it by the door. Small men swing wide. They think it makes them large. Mary Ellen's throat closed. "He'll kill you." He looked at her. Steady, calm. "He'll try." Then he began to shutter the windows, one after another, until only the fire's light remained. The room glowed dim and warm, the wind howling just beyond the walls, or N2. By dusk, the storm had found its voice. It screamed down from the hills, rattling the eaves, piling snow against the door. Inside, Mary Ellen moved quickly, banking the fire, tucking blankets tight around her child. Fear was in her, but it had changed shape, sharper now. Like a blade she meant to hold by the hilt instead of the edge. Laura watched the window, whispering, "Mama, is he coming?" Mary Ellen smoothed her hair. Not tonight, but her eyes said otherwise. Hollis stood by the door, a shadow in the flicker. He'd become the shape of protection itself, wide, silent, unmovable. Mary Ellen looked at him and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" He turned slightly. "Because no one ever did it for me." The simplicity of it stole her breath. She turned away before he could see the tears. Hours dragged. The wind screamed itself hoarse. Then, beneath it all, came another sound. Hoofbeats. Slow, then louder, then many. Hollis's jaw set. "Back room," he said. Mary Ellen froze. Hollis. She gathered Laura, heart pounding, and pulled her into the small room behind the stove. The latch clicked shut. Hollis waited in the half-dark. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Voices followed, rough, slurred, cruel.
"Loud. Miller out."
A laugh. Another voice, venomous and familiar. "You think you can hide my wife." Blow shook the door. Then another. Hollis didn't move. He waited until the hinges screamed, then reached for the lantern. The match flared, caught, and his shadow climbed the walls like a mountain standing up. He unbarred the door, pulled it open. The storm burst in, wind, snow, and 3 men behind Elias Carter. Carter's face was red with whiskey and shame. "Bring her out," he bellowed. "She's mine." Hollis lifted the lantern higher, its glow slicing the storm. "She ain't yours. Not anymore. Carter's mouth twisted. You think you can steal what belongs to me. I didn't steal her, Hollis said. You drove her out. For a moment, even the wind paused. Then Carter snarled. Get him. The first man lunged. Hollis met him halfway. The fight was quick and hard. A single crack of bone, a muffled grunt, and the man dropped into the snow. The second followed the third, ran before he landed his swing. Only Carter remained. He slid off his horse, rage staggering his steps. You'll die for this. Hollis's breath steamed in the lamplight. Maybe, but not tonight. Carter swung wild. Hollis caught his wrist, twisted until Carter fell to his knees. You're a fool, Carter spat. A woman like her'll ruin you. That's all she's good for. The wind rolls across the open plains, whispering stories of men who came before. Dust rises beneath the hooves of tired horses, and the sun bleeds gold across the endless sky. Out here, names don't matter much. What counts is courage. The kind that shows when the odds are long and the bullets are few. Every trail tells a story. Every campfire hides a memory. Some came for gold, others for glory. But most just wanted a place to call their own. Say her name again, he said, voice low, and I'll forget who I am. Carter saw it then, the line between man and monster, and looked away. Hollis released him, but Carter staggered back into the snow. This ain't over, he muttered. Hollis shut the door. The latch clicked. The storm howled once more, then began to die. Situations. Inside, the cabin was still. The fire hissed. Mary Ellen stood at the doorway to the back room, her shawl clutched tight. Is it done? For now, Hollis said, setting the rifle aside. Laura peeked out, eyes wide. Is he gone?
Go, sweetheart.
She nodded solemnly, then whispered, You're bleeding. He glanced at his knuckles, split and raw. It's nothing. Mary Ellen crossed the floor and took his hands. Her touch was careful, trembling. She cleaned the blood away with a strip of cloth. The silence between them was heavier than words, the kind that can hold both gratitude and fear. When she finished, she didn't step back.
Why didn't you kill him?
Hollis met her eyes, because he wants me to be him.
Is the plain who have mascharity. For mask that util twantity, but the yarn was seeky here. There's a pigment to nation, such the nation. The kid that disaponikists, and such a outer you send him by their roots. Out of this fruity told uding border. Saw it but see, fast to breathes. Who surely feel most, and like to Ben. Her breath hitched. Outside, the wind softened. Inside, warmth spread slow as dawn. Later, after Laura had fallen asleep by the fire, Mary Ellen stood beside Hollis. The storm's last flakes tapped the window like fingers finding rest. You'll lose everything for me, she said. He stared into the flames. A man don't lose what he never needed. She hesitated. And what is it you need, Hollis Miller? He looked at her then, and whatever answer he gave was not in words. She Jowett's story. By dawn, the storm had cleared. The world outside glittered under new snow, every fence post shining like forgiveness. Hollis stepped into the cold and breathed deep. Behind him, a woman and her child slept safe. For the first time since the earth took his wife, Hollis Miller felt the world steady beneath his boots again. Scollier state, as his junker Scollier. Epilogue, the sound of belonging. When the sun rolls higher, the chimney smoke climbed straight and sure into a sky of clean blue. Danger. The word would reach town by noon. Rumor always rode faster than truth. But by then, it wouldn't matter. Inside that cabin, laughter would rise again, soft and unafraid. Laura's small voice, Mary Ellen's quiet smile, and the sound beneath it all, the steady rhythm of a man who had finally laid his ghosts to rest. No vows spoken, no witnesses should he see, just the hush of snow melting on the roof, the whisper of the creek, and two souls who had chosen, at last, to stay when the wind howled.